Okay, sorry. For those of you who are on the Zoom, we understand there was an issue with the YouTube feed. It is now fixed. So the City of Kawartha Lake's YouTube page should be running now.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's 1:04 p.m. and we're going to call this August 10th meeting of the Planning Advisory Committee meeting to order. Can I have a motion to adopt the amended agenda, please? Councillor O'Reilly, seconded by Member Willick. All in favor? That carries. Thank you. Is there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Okay, seeing none, we're going to move right into public meeting reports. As required under the Planning Act, a public meeting is being held prior to the committee making a recommendation on this application. All recommendations made today will be forwarded to the August 23rd regular council meeting. The purpose of this public hearing is to allow the committee to gather information on the applications before us, to hear those wishing to make oral submissions on applications, and to allow the committee to ask questions of the applicants, interested parties, and staff. Everyone who makes a presentation at this meeting is requested to provide their name for the public record. In the interest of time, the committee respectfully asks that you keep your presentation to no more than 5 minutes. When called, please turn on your video and turn off your mute and state your name. And for those in council chambers, you can move up to the podium and turn on the mic, state your name for the record, and go into your presentation. So at this time, we will start with 3.1 on today's agenda, Plan 2022-047, an application to amend the Kawartha Lakes Official Plan and Mariposa Zoning Bylaw 94-07 with a plan of subdivision at 27 Stub Road, Mariposa. Jonathan, you're up.
Good afternoon, Planning Advisory Committee, and thank you all for attending this afternoon. I understand we have quite the gallery full, both virtual and otherwise. I'm here today to present a staff report on the proposed redevelopment of Kings Bay Golf and Country Club located at 27 Stub Road in the Mariposa Township. Joel, is my presentation showing on your end?
If you can screen share, that's the best, but if you don't have that ready, we have it on.
Okay. I can do that. I'll do that as well. Sorry, I thought this one was ready to go. Give me 1 second. Nope, disabled screen sharing.
You should be good to go.
Perfect, thank you. Alrighty. Sorry about that, folks. So here we have the subject area of the proposed development. I guess I would first off like to kind of preface this this presentation, seeing the number of attendees here, and just want to say that this is very much staff's opportunity to collect information, hear comments and hear feedback on the proposal, on the proposed development outlined by Geranium for the subject lands. Staff are very much underway with the review. I cannot stress that enough, actually. A number of our studies are currently out for peer review. And while that is happening, we are looking to collect comments and feedback on the proposal. So by no means does the staff have a recommendation other than to refer it back for further review until those comments and everything is collected. And we have had time to review, and of course have had time to review your comments that you have all submitted. And I want to thank you very much for submitting everything that you have. We got quite the stack here. Very thoughtful and insightful details provided by you all, and that's much appreciated. So just thank you for that. Moving right along into the presentation, I'm going to keep it relatively high level. I understand we have Dranium here to build out build out further the real technical nuts and bolts of the proposed development. So carrying on with my presentation, here we have the subject land, 27 Stub Road, shown in orange. Here's just a location plan showing the subject lands again. These lands, under the City of Kawartha Lakes official plan, are designated Development Plan Area 3, which is a essentially carried over designation from the Victoria County official plan, which has these lands designated as Shoreline and Nature Reserve. Shoreline, of course, shown in S, and Nature Reserve shown in an R. These particular designations currently permit the uses that have occurred there, the golf course and country club, uses that have occurred, as well as the accessory retail and shop, and the natural elements, of course, as well. These designations acknowledge those. Here is the current zoning. While it looks a little like spaghetti, it is, at the end of the day, it is to permit the existing uses and acknowledge the environmental protection and the natural heritage features that exist all around the site, whether that's wetlands, potential species at risk, and natural habitats, that sort of thing. Woodlands potentially, those things all kind of fall under those zones. And then of course the C3 zone is a commercial type of zone that permitted the golf course. Here we have the proposal in front of you, the proposed plan of subdivision. So proposed by Uranium Homes is a 44 lot plan of subdivision shown in front of you. The proposed lots are sort of shown in 3 different areas. On the very north, I guess, west of the site, a little bit just below that, and then in the southwestern part, pardon me. So these 44 units, 44 lots would be scattered through that. And of course, part of our review, we look to determine the conformity of this proposed development, see if it can be serviced or not, as well as all of the various environmental implications that exist with new developments in this particular area. So with that, as part of the submission package for this proposed development, Dranium, or the applicant, has provided us with a number of studies. This includes a planning opinion report, a environmental impact study, an arborist report, phase 1 and phase 2 environmental site assessments, a geotechnical and hydrogeological investigation, a water supply investigation, a water budget assessment, a functional servicing and stormwater management report, a phosphorus budget, a transportation impact study, a stage 1 archaeological assessment, and of course the draft plan of subdivision that you see in front of you, a topographic survey, a potential landscaping, and a boundary survey. That's more for the plan of subdivision end of things. So staff thus far have completed a very brief, very high-level policy review of the subject lands, because as I mentioned before, the technical studies, which ultimately inform the entire picture, the entire recommendation of staff and the city, are very much under review. And we are waiting to hear from our reviewing agencies and partners on that front. So the subject lands kind of fit, as far as a policy goes, staff's opinion, that they kind of fit as a settlement area. They are not explicitly a hamlet settlement area, nor are they an urban settlement area. But the development plan area designation from the OP does indicate, prescribe, that this is an area that has been planned for development and is a type of settlement area. So there are a number of policies that the provincial policy statement prescribes that apply to that designation. This includes requirements for infrastructure and public service facilities, mindfulness and the conservation of the natural heritage features, water and cultural heritage and archaeology. Noting, of course, that these are all things that are currently being reviewed, and that the residents have described as we're calling an issues list. So those are currently being reviewed. As far as the place to grow, a growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe. Similar policies under that document also apply to all settlement areas, which we are reviewing and evaluating the application against. The City of Kawartha Lake's official plan, as I described earlier, describes these lands as Development Plan Area 3, or DP3 for short. So with that comes the Victoria County official plan designation of shoreline and natural reserve. So through the proposed development, what's being proposed by the applicant is to redesignate these lands or amend the designation to allow for 44 additional residential lots within the development plan area. The nature reserve lands, as I described earlier, are to maintain and acknowledge the natural heritage features. That delineation or that outline would very much be carried forward as it is currently shown. Of course, these designations would be implemented by way of a bylaw amendment to the Mariposa zoning bylaw. So through the zoning bylaw amendment, we would look to, or what would be proposed is a type of rural residential zone to accommodate the residential uses, and then application of the same sort of environmental protection zones that are currently applied to the nature reserve areas. These would be carried forward and acknowledge, like I said, the natural heritage features, the environmental features of the subject lands. The zoning bylaw currently, the tourist commercial zones would be repealed or removed, and that rural residential zone would carry forward. So in line with the policy and requirement to notify residents within 500 meters of the subject site, notice was sent out, as well as signage where it was placed across, I guess, the rather large area. At the time of the report writing, for those of you who read it, you will have known I've indicated 6 pieces of correspondence were received. Of course, there have been a lot more since then. And at a high level, these issues can be summarized into concerns about transportation, how vehicles are going to enter and exit, how vehicles are going to move throughout the area, and concerns for safety as pertains to transportation. Archaeological concerns with the stage 1 archaeological assessment that was prepared, and being aware of the areas of cultural significance. And tied to that is ongoing consultation with Curve Lake First Nation. And I will let Geranium speak to that part, as there have been recent updates on that front. Another key issue includes infrastructure and servicing. So how we are aware, staff are aware that there are comments and concerns pertaining to the water supply and overall servicing of the Kings Bay area. So these reports, the water supply investigation, water budget assessment, geotech and hydrogeological investigations, functioning, servicing, and stormwater management report are all being third-party peer reviewed. So before we can make any recommendation one way or another, we do need to hear back from our peer reviewers and ensure that there's water to drink and that washrooms can be used sufficiently. Another concern is environmental and natural heritage features, something that many of the community have indicated. With that, we have, currently under review of the environmental impact study with the species at risk assessment, an arborist report, the phase 1 and phase 2 environmental site assessments, and the phosphorus budget. These are all currently, again, being reviewed. So largely, staff are aware of the comments and concerns that have been provided by the neighbors and the area residents, and they are currently being peer reviewed. These studies have to be acceptable. They have to work out. The development has to be able to be used essentially before staff can determine a position or make a recommendation on it. So with that, staff are asking that respectfully, of course, that the Planning Advisory Committee refer this back to staff so that we can continue working on the evaluation. We can continue ensuring that all of these documents and studies are being reviewed adequately, and that we can look at addressing some of the comments and concerns that the neighbors and the area residents have. So with that, I will take any questions on the report and presentation.
Thank you for that, Jonathan. Committee, any questions of Jonathan at this time? Councillor O'Reilly.
Maybe just a quick one. I won't belabor it. Thanks for all the history going back to the Mariposa zoning bylaw and the places to grow. Does the growth management study enter into this at all?
Pardon me. Yeah, through the chair. So the growth management study, the 2011 growth management strategy does not contemplate these particular lands. Whether or not it is going to be looked at in the new study, I don't believe it is. However, I would look to the Director Hawley to confirm that.
Thank you through the chair to the councillor. Yes, the growth management strategy is a bit of a static document, and it in this instance, when it was prepared, it just looked at the number of units that were there at the time and didn't really contemplate any additional development. However, from the perspective of this development, if the servicing can be accommodated and if all the technical issues can be dealt with and we can work something out, we're prepared to take a look at this development. And in light of the number of units, there are other properties where we are sort of going beyond the GMS numbers. Sort of for committee's information, we are going to be looking at that issue sort of globally through the GMS update as well as the servicing master plan update to sort of build in some flexibility so that we can move beyond if there's targets that are on properties, that we can move beyond targets if there is a reasonable need or a demand. But in this case, you're correct. The number of units would be at probably what's built out there at 107 or 111, whatever it is, and that would be the number that's in the growth management strategy.
Any further questions of Jonathan? Member Barkwell.
Thanks, Jonathan. I was wondering, how long has the golf course been inoperable?
Through the chair, I believe it ceased in 2019. I believe it was 2019.
Yeah, that is correct, Jonathan.
Any further questions of Jonathan at this time? Okay, seeing none. Does the applicant, owner, or agent on behalf of the applicant owner wish to speak to the application?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I do. I would like to. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today. And as you can see, I'm accompanied by members of our consulting team who are available to respond to questions should it be necessary. I'm going to make a brief presentation, and Matthew Corey, our consulting planner, is going to join me in the presentation. So can I ask that our slide deck be placed on the screen? We need share screen. Oh, we need the ability to share our screen from, I guess, the clerk.
Who's sharing their screen? Cheryl?
I think we got it. Yeah.
Yeah, great. Thank you. If you can put it into full screen mode, that's great. Thank you.
Okay, I will do that. Pardon me? Okay, good. Okay, so good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, members of the committee, and those joining us online today. My name is Cheryl Schindra. I'm Executive Vice President with Geranium, and as I mentioned, I'm joined by members of our consulting team, and most particularly Matt Corey, our planner, who will join me in this presentation. Here's an outline of the points that we intended to cover off. Mr. Durowitz has covered a number of these already, so we don't intend to reiterate the points made there, and we'll be able to abbreviate our presentation accordingly. Geranium is new to the city of Kawartha Lake, so I wanted just to take a very brief moment to introduce ourselves. We were established in 1977, and we've been building homes and developing communities all across Southern Ontario, and in particular across the Greater Toronto area. We're proud to say that we are recipients of awards for the work that we do and the communities we build, and there are some of them noted there. Two developments I want to just note as being particularly relevant, being lakeside developments and having a high degree of environmental sensitivity and consideration into them. Obviously, this is of a very different scale. This development, Friday Harbor, is on Lake Simcoe and is underway, presently being built out today, but you can see some images there of what's been built so far. And we bring that same level of attention to environmental stewardship to every development, particularly those that are on sensitive water bodies, like here in Kings Bay. The Courts of Canterbury to the south of this development, our proposed development at Kings Bay, is in Port Perry on Lake Scugog, and it's currently under development as well, a community where we have brought new homes into an existing community in a sensitive way. We've had a very productive and positive working relationship with the community association there. And we hope to have a similar kind of positive dialogue with our residents and neighbors in Kings Bay. Gulf North Properties are our partner in this development, a company that was established in 1994. They acquired this property in 2009 as a golf course operation. And as was just questioned, it was operation ceased in 2019. Here's a listing of our consulting team who are on the line with us today in their various expertise and disciplines. The existing community, again, as was noted, consists of 111 single detached homes that were built by another developer builder in the early 2000s, perhaps late 90s. And existing also in the vicinity is an existing wastewater treatment facility, as well as a water treatment plant, together with 3 groundwater wells. The subject lands that we're here to talk about today surround the existing community. They consist of approximately 128 acres, include the former golf course, the former pro shop, clubhouse, and maintenance buildings. And again, it was acquired in 2009 as a fully constructed golf course. The applications that we have filed with the city are in the context of a housing supply situation that is particularly critical in Ontario. Ontario as a province across the country has got the worst housing supply deficit, if I could say it that way, of all the provinces in the country. And when you look more closely in the Greater Toronto area, that is really driving the shortfall that we see province-wide. Here is a summary of housing supply that failed to meet the demand. And these are measured against provincial forecasts going back to 2006. And so all those blue lines that are below the 0 line show how many units we fell short as an industry, I suppose, in meeting the demand that was forecasted. The current provincial government, on being elected in 2018, very quickly responded and recognized that we have a housing crisis, insufficient supply, and there are a number of documents and pieces of legislation that are noted on the screen where the province is expressing the problem and the solution being the need for more housing in a more streamlined and efficient manner. Most recently, in yesterday's throne speech by the provincial government, the government did reiterate its commitment to building more housing more quickly and more efficiently. Mr. Dorowitz noted that our applications have been accompanied by a series of technical reports, and we're going to speak a little more detail on these later in our presentation, but there they are noted on the screen. And I'm going to now ask Mr. Corey to provide a little more information on the basis for the applications.
Hello, everyone, and why don't we do this? Here's, and jump out of this. I'm just going to say, I just realized that if yours is on, I can't see mine. That's the problem. Why not? Hello, everyone. Oh. All right, everyone. Good afternoon, and thank you for having us. Really happy to be in front of the public and very happy to be here to speak to this item and to the proposed development. Mr. Dorowitz gave a very good summary of a lot of the policy context and the development application, so I will endeavor to be brief and cover some of the other items. Certainly, this is the lands are within a rural settlement area. There is provincial policy mandates and requirements that we look at making the best use of lands within settlement areas. And certainly since the cessation of the golf course, there is a need to reconsider the use of the lands that were on the former golf course lands. As Mr. Dorowitz mentioned, the official plan doesn't provide a direction other than the maximum amount of units. But that being said, the use of the lands certainly has to be reconsidered, and that's certainly part of this proposal to come forward with some additional residential units and, of course, a great amount of open space and other uses that can benefit both the existing residents and new residents in this portion of the settlement area in the city. Very high level, the stats were gone over. We have, there's 111 existing lots. The official plan and the shoreline designation identifies 107. And there is the former golf course on these lands. As noted, as I mentioned earlier, the official plan amendment is simply to change the number of maximum permitted residential units within this designation. The permission for residential uses is there, and it is permitted. And that would bring the total amount of units up to permitted of 155 units in this area. And it's just to be clear, that is very much a housekeeping amendment with relation to permitting those additional lots. The draft plan of subdivision illustrates where the 44 new residential lots will be created. The statistics are shown here on this slide. Only 13% of the overall area of the former golf course is proposed for development, that being a combination of the residential and public road. The majority of the whole rest of the property would be either for open space and parks. And to note on this slide and subsequent slides, the orange areas are the areas proposed for new streets and lotting. The green areas are the open space and parkland. There were some comments that we saw already from the public that that's a lot of park space and how much would be there to be maintained. And both in our planning opinion and the applicant's position is that there's a dialogue to happen with the residents, with the city, to determine the total amount of parkland ultimately provided versus that would be an open space trail matrix and system to provide access and through this whole area for all the residents. Very quickly, this is the proposed amount of 44 detached lots are in two main tranches. There's an existing development, of course, that is along these two major streets. And then we have proposed lots that are from 60 to 84 foot frontages. It should be noted that generally on the draft plan, where there is lots directly across from other lots, we've taken pains to try to maintain similar lot width for compatibility. But generally, all of these lots are larger and we believe compatible with the existing homes that are there. And of course, there is landscape buffering and vegetation plantings for screening that will be proposed, and there will be further discussions between new lots and existing homes, existing residents. In terms of the site schematics, we touched on this. These are the two areas for development. Mr. Durowitz covered the existing zoning quite nicely. The zoning bylaw amendment that's being proposed is to generally permit the rural residential 3 zone with an exception on the areas proposed in the orange for development. That is consistent with the standards that are generally on the existing homes there today. So that is putting in zoning that generally is compliant with the existing zoning. One of the notes, minimum distance separation, was something that was raised in some of the comments. One of the requirements of the bylaw is that there's minimum distance separation. The proposal by the applicant is to remove that requirement from the zoning for the very simple reason that existing homes wouldn't comply with that, but also the official plan doesn't require minimum distance separation when you're within a settlement area. So that is, again, a housekeeping amendment to deal with that through the zoning bylaw. And the proposed standards, and you can see these are very similar to the existing standards of existing lots are shown on this chart. In terms of what has been done, there has been, as Mr. Durowitz mentioned, a lot of technical study, and there's a lot of ongoing work and consultation with the agencies and with the city through processing this application. The environmental impact study was one of the larger pieces. There was substantive field work and species at risk analysis and work done in staking with the Kawartha Region Conservation Authority that resulted in this composite map of environmental features. So that also has an approach suggested and adopted into the proposed draft plan that all natural heritage features will be designed to be preserved and protected with appropriate buffers. Those buffers are listed here in bullet point form. They're certainly always intended to be protected buffer between naturalized and enhanced spaces. There's butternut trees that are significant species that were identified. They will be retained. And there's also been some turtle habitat that was identified, and turtle exclusion fencing will be provided during construction. And lastly, the timing of vegetation removals outside will, of course, only occur outside of the mandated critical periods for birds and turtles. In terms of grading and servicing, the study area, of course, is located in the Nonquan River subwatershed and Lake Scugog watershed in Kawartha. The proposed grading and street design is in keeping with the existing residential neighborhood and cognizant of its context in this area. And the roadways and cul-de-sacs are designed, of course, to the City of Kawartha Lakes standards. With regards to servicing, there's been a lot of comments on that, and certainly our team is here to answer any questions that may come today. But certainly we're here to hear comments from the public and take those back as we finalize work. But the water treatment facility being proposed, it's important to note that currently the existing facility that's there that services all of the residents who live in this area is only operating at 46% of utilization. And that's, there's also provincial mandate to use infrastructure efficiently and effectively, especially when reconsidering land use. So the proposed development would still only take that up to approximately 64% of utilization, but it would make more efficient use of the water treatment facility. And then similarly with the waste, that's the water treatment, and with the wastewater treatment facility, which also exists today, The current utilization is around 30%. There was allowance for additional development built in, as I understand it, from our technical team to allow for additional growth. And the proposed development would take this up to 52% utilization. And again, making more efficient use of this infrastructure. There is one new well that is proposed for water supply, but that is solely for redundancy purposes. And that would be improving the water supply system for the existing community. There is no increase in the overall permitted pumping rate that is required based on the technical work done to date. And to address fire protection, of course, 2 additional 43,000 liter storage tanks are proposed. Water supply, these are the locations of the wells. Certainly the Kings Bay sand aquifer is suitable for the water supply that is required for this additional development to this area. And as noted, some of the work we've done, an additional well is proposed for the redundancy purpose, but there is no anticipated impacts to surface water features or nearby wells. That's incredibly important and something we have to consider when doing our work. And the water quality is anticipated and will be looked at by the engineers to assure that it meets the Ontario drinking water quality standards, except for hardness, of course. Treatment for hardness in this case is common, especially with aquifers with a lot of sediment or other kind of nutrients in it. In terms of water supply and source water protection, there's a new well for redundancy again, and there's dialogue ongoing with source water protection officials for minor updates. In terms of the stormwater management strategy, stormwater management runoff drains either side to Lake Scugog to the east or the Nonquan River to the west. The City of Kawartha Lakes does not require quantity control. Quality control is to be provided through LIDs. Those are low impact development measures throughout the site, which generally consist of adding topsoil depth on all grassed areas and enhance grass soils with and without an infiltration component. Those proposed LIDs result in an increase in average annual infiltration of approximately 11% compared to the existing condition with the former golf course lands of about 4% increase in runoff. The existing condition of the golf course, and of course, that would result in a 4% increase in runoff. Erosion control is proposed for with infiltration swales provided a retention volume exceeding the 5 millimeter storm event. In terms of phosphorus management, that is one of the requirements in speaking with the Conservation Authority. We have to look at, there is a combination of on-site and off-site measures being proposed to effectively and properly deal with phosphorus mitigation. And that will ultimately result in no net increase of any phosphorus through the combination of those measures. And then in terms of the transportation study, we did see comments on that as well. Traffic impacts were reviewed at Simcoe Street, certainly as you come up Stub Road from this current area of development. There is no physical improvements recommended from the transportation study. And the cul-de-sacs have been designed again to meet or exceed the city standards. The local road network analysis was looked at with the addition of these 44 lots and units. And certainly site analysis was also reviewed at the proposed Street B Southcrest Drive. We have heard the comments though, and we'll be taking those back and looking at them, although the work that has been done to date assures us that the traffic impact is within acceptable realm of what is appropriate for this area and these streets. So with that, Cheryl, there's the community consultation. I'll turn it back to you. And then the only other thing I think we should talk about is the archaeological.
Okay, thank you, Matthew. And so just to explain what we have done so far in consultation, we reached out to the Kings Bay Residents Association very early on in the process prior to us coming forward with an application. We had a couple of virtual meetings, as you can see there. We also held a community information meeting open to all the association members last September. And those discussions are ongoing with residents, particularly as it relates to screening and buffering in between their homes and our proposed new homes. We have also, on a proactive basis, reached out to the First Nations who have an interest in this area. All 7 Williams Treaty First Nations have been contacted regarding our archaeological work. And you can see the names of those First Nations listed there. And there are a number of them who are interested in an ongoing dialogue as it relates to our stage 2 work. There have been comments on the archaeology, and I want to take a brief minute to clarify that there was archaeology work done in conjunction with the development that is there today. In other words, the homes that are built and the golf course that was constructed by the previous developer and home builder. And those reports back in the late 90s recommended some stage 3 archaeological work, which may or may not have been done. There's no evidence that that work was done. Nevertheless, the golf course was constructed and the homes were built. We have now had our archaeologists out, first of all, consulting with the Ministry of Culture, who has oversight over all archaeological matters. And on their recommendation and guidance, our archaeologists have gone into the field, into the areas where we are proposing development, and have done a further survey. And not only that, but have done that work at a more intensive level. So for example, where archaeology assessments are typically done at 5-meter intervals, we have doubled that level of intensity and conducted our work at 2.5-meter intervals. And the results of that work show that there are no archaeological findings on the areas that we are proposing for development. So the dialogue with the First Nations is ongoing, and with the Ministry of Culture. And of course, we will be keeping staff at the city apprised of those discussions. In terms of our next steps, certainly we want to hear from the community today. We've got written comments from a number of individuals in the community. And as Jonathan has noted, the review of our technical reports is ongoing. And so we will be continuing to work with staff on completing that review process. And in the shortest amount of time possible, or as soon as it's possible and practical, we will hope to have a recommendation report come back to council for a council decision on the applications. Closing off, I just want to end with a few quotes from our colleagues, if I could say that, in Canterbury, in Port Perry. And the development there that is ongoing has been done in collaboration with and with the oversight of the Canterbury Commons Residents Association. And through that collaborative process, we have come to find a very productive working relationship, and we certainly hope to be able to do that with our neighbors in Kings Bay as well. So with that, Mr. Chair, that concludes our presentation, and I thank you very much for indulging us, and we would welcome any questions you may have now.
Thank you for the presentation. Committee, any questions at this point? Councillor Seymour Fagan.
Hi, thank you, and through you. I have a question in regards to the archaeological assessment. I know you've done your own, but now do the Indigenous communities come in and do their own as well?
Through Mr. Chair to Councillor, the Indigenous groups were invited to join us on site as we were conducting our work. And I don't believe anybody attended on site, but they were invited to do so. They decided they would not attend, but they did want to have copies of our work, which we have provided and will continue to do so.
Okay, great. So following that up, I'm just wondering if they decide to go in on their own, can they do that, which might hold up the project? I have a question on that because of other projects that have been worked on within Kawartha Lakes.
I may call on our archaeologist, Ms. Morgan, to respond to that in terms of the protocol in that regard.
Sure. So I'm Jen Morgan. I'm the licensed archaeologist with WSP Golder. So archaeological assessments need to be undertaken by licensed archaeologists. There aren't many licensed archaeologists in the Indigenous communities, and they don't tend to do the assessments themselves. The way that they participate in archaeological work is to participate alongside us. So as Cheryl mentioned, they were invited to join us, which is the regular process. And they decided that they were not going to join, but like Cheryl said, they do want to be updated. I don't foresee them wanting to do their own assessment. You know, they could say, we would like you to further explore certain areas, but I don't foresee them requesting that. But they would have us do any further assessment that was needed. They won't need to go in themselves.
Let's hope not. Okay, thank you very much.
Mike Barkwell.
Okay, thank you very much. Very detailed report. One of the questions that I had for Mr. Corey is in your report, you say that under provincial policy, you say that the property is within a rural settlement area, and therefore the policy statements there are belong, are in agreement with that. And on the EcoView report, they maintain that the property is not within the settlement area. And I just wonder if you've addressed that or how you can address that. There seems, and that's like if you're not in the DP3, then I think all of the amendments, the zoning amendments, are based on you being in a settlement area. So it seems kind of a key issue.
Yep. Yeah, and through you, Mr. Chair, certainly that was something that we looked at very closely, both in prior to the applicant preparing its development proposal, as well as through preparing our own planning opinion. I'll say that I think that the issue stems quite simply, and I've reviewed EcoView's comments on this. The official plan doesn't specifically say this is a settlement area, but the official plan identifies what settlement areas are, and this meets every criteria of that. One thing that I look at personally when I'm deciding what a settlement area is or not, where it's not clear or there's any doubt in that regard, is that whether, especially if it's in a shoreline designation, are people living there full time or not? If they're not living there full time or it's seasonal dwellings, there's a bit of a different discussion that can happen. Certainly the residents live here full time, as well they're municipally serviced. And that's another very strong indicator and hallmark that meets all the criteria in the city's definition, which is very close to the province's definition of what a settlement area is. Certainly this is not a settlement area of the nature of an urban settlement area where you'd end up putting heavy intensification of any kind, but it is a rural settlement area. And certainly I've noted your staff have said the same in looking at that. And, when you're in a settlement area and you have to contend with that, one of the obligations is to make the full and most effective use of those lands in the appropriate context. And that's what the provincial policy speaks to. That is why, in my opinion, what the applicant is proposing is appropriate. Having the lots of similar sizes and only in those areas outside of natural heritage feature protection that would go on for the vast majority of the lands is the best way to optimize the lands and use the infrastructure in the most effective way possible, given the context of where we're at. So that's another important point to make for everyone. There are different types of settlement area, and a rural settlement area is rural for a reason. It's not the intensity you'd see in others. So the mix of land uses will be more weighted towards a simpler mix of land uses, like just the residential and the open space components. We can certainly discuss that and explore that more through to the final approval in the development process. But I know your staff have interpreted it the same way as we have. And I think it does stem from it just not simply saying this is a settlement area in the official plan, but that is not the only way you identify settlement areas. I hope that answers the question.
It does. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any further questions at this time? Okay, seeing none, We're going to move into some of the public comments, questions, and concerns. We have quite a number that are in council chambers today and more on Zoom. So I have a list in front of me, and I'm just simply going to go down the list, starting with those present in council chambers, and then we'll move to the ones that have indicated an interest to speak today on Zoom. So before we begin, just a reminder to everybody in the essence of time, everybody has 5 minutes. The deputy clerk will be timing the presentations to try, because of the number of people wishing to speak to this, to keep it going. Okay? So first we're going to start off with Susan Merriman, President of the Kings Bay Residents Association.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Susan Merriman, and I'm the president of the Kings Bay Residents Association and a homeowner in Kings Bay. I'm speaking on behalf of the members of our association who have many concerns regarding the proposal for development by Geranium Homes, including but not limited to the impact on our community's current water supply and waste treatment system, the environmental impact on wildlife and trees and other flora, the potential to negatively affect the values of several properties, the effect and risks of increased traffic, the disturbance of the sites containing Indigenous resources that previous studies have identified, and the future of the undeveloped land that Geranium has no plans for. In September 2020, Geranium Homes shared a presentation with our members stating that they build great communities. But the residents of Kings Bay already have a great community, and adding 40% more homes to this well-established, carefully planned out, mature neighborhood will not improve Kings Bay, but instead will hurt it by creating an additional strain on its fragile water and sewage systems and by upsetting the sensitive balance of the environment and development that currently exists. The significant increase in traffic created by an additional 44 homes, especially in a community like ours with no sidewalks, no streetlights, and narrow curving roads, will also create hazardous conditions for our residents, many of whom are retired and semi-retired, who enjoy walking along the roads throughout all seasons. The plan proposes the creation of 3 new streets, all ending in cul-de-sacs, which can cause difficulties for fire services, school buses, and snow removal companies. It may look good on paper, but is not good planning and causes current residents near the entrances to those streets to be almost totally surrounded by roads, with increased noise, light, and loss of privacy being inevitable. In addition, the current development application has highlighted the failings of past governments to fully respect the archaeological sites that were identified back in 2000. We expect that our more enlightened governments of today will ensure that these sites have been fully and completely surveyed to prevent further disturbance to the land that belonged to the Indigenous peoples who inhabited it before we did. For a bit of history, prior to 2000, the land our community was built on was part of an adjoining farm owned by the Short family. But out of the farmland, the Chicken Dance organization created a wonderfully unique urban-style microcosm of 111 bungalows with municipal water and service within a totally rural setting, and surrounded it with a professional golf course that would be recognized by the experts of the day as one of the best 9-hole golf courses in Canada. And with CKL's help, the residents were assured they would always have safe and ample water supply. My husband and I moved into Kings Bay in 2017, drawn by the municipal services, the golf course, and a beautiful view of the Nonquan River. We got to enjoy the golf course for just 2 seasons before Gulf North's obvious mismanagement of this facility, in particular the maintenance of the course, contributed to the course no longer being profitable, in their words. This in turn led Gulf North to try to dispose of the land through their connection with Geranium Homes, so they could scratch some money out of the now defunct golf course land. 16 of the homes that are proposed in Kings Bay will be situated right beside Short's working farm, which houses cattle, sheep, and chickens. Building homes that close to the farm should not be permitted, and our planner will be talking to this point in his deputation. But as a resident who lives close to the farm already, with all of its sights, smells, and sounds, I can assure you that the minimum distance setbacks absolutely should apply in this situation, as they did when Kings Bay was designed originally. I spoke with Jack Short, who owns the farm, and he said he is sure that anyone buying a lot near his farm will end up being unhappy, because as he says, the animals are stinky. But he is also concerned, as are we, that the additional demand on the farm from the water for the 44 homes could negatively affect the water flow and supply. You will hear a lot of deputations today from individual residents and from our planner, and the resounding theme throughout will be that we are trusting the CKL to thoroughly check each and every claim that Geranium makes, especially those that pertain to water supply and environmental and archaeological protections, and that the CKL will protect our interests as citizens and taxpayers of the City of Kawartha Lakes. We're also asking the CKL to ensure that if the development is approved, the undeveloped land will not become an eyesore to the community, and that whoever agrees to take on the land will also take on the responsibility of maintaining it in the same fashion as it is currently being maintained, so that it poses no safety issue to the current community. I'd like to thank you for this opportunity to share the concerns of Kings Bay Residents Association members with you. And I would like each of you to put yourselves in our shoes and look at this development through the lens of the residents of Kings Bay and say no to this proposal. Thank you very much for your attention and your time.
Thank you, Susan. Kent Randall, EcoView Consulting.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Kent Randall. I'm principal at EcoView Consulting Services. I have been retained by the Kings Bay Residents Association to provide planning review of the applications on their behalf. And in my capacity in that role, I have reviewed all the materials that have been provided. I did submit a letter with my concerns. This should have been part of the agenda package. I'm sure you've all seen it. Hopefully you've reviewed it. I did notice that a number of my concerns were brought up in the presentation by the applicant, which is good. I'm happy that they're also looking at that and reviewing it. So I'll just briefly, I won't go through in too much detail, but I'll briefly just touch upon some of those points because I know that the settlement area point came up. And I do stand by that opinion that this is not a settlement area. It's not identified in the OP. I understand the idea of it being a concentration of development, but that's not necessarily what we would call a settlement area. We wouldn't call that a settlement area, or otherwise we have concentrations of development all over the city in rural areas. Are they all settlement areas now? I think there are major implications to calling this a settlement area. Beyond that, of course, the implications are MDS, as Susan touched upon. We have a large farm operation just to the west. If this is not a settlement area, the implementation guidelines require MDS to be calculated for that barn, which would present a fairly large setback. We're talking about cows, chickens, sheep. It's a big operation, big enough that it would interfere with those development areas up in the northwest. So it's something that I hope that staff consider seriously, and it is something that I do stand by in terms of my opinion as to whether this is a settlement area. I do not believe it is. There's no indication in that DP3 area, those designations. There's nothing in the policies that say that this is a settlement area. There's nothing in the OP that says this is a settlement area. I do note that I had some concerns with cultural heritage. It's good to see that those sites are being assessed. It sounds like that they may have clearance. Okay, we'd like to see that information. We haven't seen that information yet, so that would be good to see. And finally, the dedication of the parkland, or the conveyance of the parkland. We're talking about a very, very large area, a lot of it being passive. So this is something that the city has to be willing to take on. It's far greater than your 5%, of course. Which is fine if that's what the city wants to do, but there doesn't seem to be any indication that they would. we'd like to see what would happen. And if that is not taken over by the city, what happens in that case? What happens with the continued use of those lands? Who's responsible for them? These are questions that we feel need to be answered. So I'm happy to answer any questions that committee may have. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Mr. Randall, and I can confirm that your review is included as part of committee's package this afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Peter West, do you have anything you would like to add? Okay, Joe Doyle, anything you would like to add? You're good? Okay. Bruce Deacon, anything you would like to add? Okay. Kim Beattie, anything you would like to add? Samantha King, Jim Wakeford. Jim, anything you would like to add?
Yes. Good afternoon. My name is Jim Wakeford. I'm a resident in Kings Bay. I thank you for the opportunity and the time to hear about the rich lands that make up the area that comprises the King Bay community. While I'm grateful to have such a natural environment and do not want to change the state of the development, I only hope that I may properly convey the importance of these lands without it sounding and coming across as NIMBYism. Our community lies in a one-of-a-kind, a very special land bounded by the Lake Skugog to the east and the south, and the provincially significant Nonquan River and wetland complex to the west. This peninsula lies a mere 600 meters from the Ontario Protected Greenbelt. In fact, much of the Nonquan River can be found within this protected area. Golder and Associates Archaeological Assessment, completed in 2021, outlines the presence of over 20 archaeological sites on this land, which speaks to the nature and the value the Indigenous people had and the way of life that they enjoyed there. For decades, it supported farming and hunting. As well, it provided accessible routes and a natural habitat for a multitude of wildlife. We are proud of the continued balance we have struck between the natural site and our community, and worry that further development will significantly disturb this harmony. The addition of 44 homes to the region will have a significant impact on the surrounding region. Lake Skugog and the Nonquan River are currently under a walleye fishing moratorium. A once plentiful fish stock has been seriously depleted, in part due to the increased phosphorus levels, which are fueling the excess of plant growth. The decaying plants are negatively impacting the gravel spawning beds favored by the walleye. The additional phosphorus loading into the waterways created by the development will have further negative impact on the recovery of the walleye fishery. The environmental impact study completed by Beacon Environmental lists the abundance of nature identified in this peninsula during the study period. It includes 125 floral species, over 200 trees, 41 species of birds, 2 types of amphibians, and 2 kinds of nesting turtles. Present on this land is the butternut tree, which is protected under the Endangered Species Act, barn swallows, which are federally and provincially threatened species. The eastern wood pewee is identified as another concern. Also identified were snapping turtles, which are listed as a special concern in the Endangered Species Act. This survey does not include all wildlife and omitted the presence of other birds frequenting the area, including bald eagle, common raven, snowy owl, trumpeter swan, sandhill cranes, terns, and mallard ducks. These are all birds that we enjoy in our great little peninsula. Also of note, but not indicated in the study, is the presence of the monarch butterfly, now recognized as an endangered species. And in our area, there is an abundant presence of milkweed, which is the only breeding habitat of the monarch. According to Beacon's arborist report, over 200 trees have been identified for removal. These will have a negative impact on natural habitat, animal food, oxygen production, loss of CO2 absorption. Even if these trees were replaced, it'll take decades before we return to the current state. I install over a dozen birdhouses throughout the community, most of which find tenants each year. The benefits of having an active bird population are significant in terms of pollination, insect control, weed seed reduction. Their song and multicolored presence in our neighborhood are something to be treasured and not be destroyed. I understand there is some of the identified habitat for this area is not directly within the proposed development site, but rather adjacent to it. What I do not understand is how we ensure the preservation of this natural environment with a multi-year development mere meters away. The Beacon survey acknowledged that the effects on wildlife associated with the noise and light is very difficult to quantify. They also acknowledge that the development may provide the retention of trees recommended protection, but in a discouraging fact, only 8 trees are slated for preservation. So there's going to be a wholesale slaughter there. I was encouraged to read the Beacon survey that includes measures to reduce the environmental impact. However, I can't help but wonder whether suggestions such as daily turtle checks, turtle awareness training, and on-site staff and specific training of tree removal can be enforced if these steps are sufficient to protect the land. The City of Kawartha Lakes clearly recognizes the importance of green space protection, as evidenced through many of your own strategies, as well as the inclusion of an environmental first policy in the official plan. The significant wetland is a wonderful and rich resource that needs protecting and is not an appropriate place for development. The surveys and recommendations being proposed do not do enough to ensure we conserve this great green space that has positively impacted the natural environment for centuries. I am not against growth or change, but suggest it be done intentionally and with purposeful, positive impact on our great planet. I hope that we won't pave paradise to put up a parking lot. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wakeford. Richard Vendrag, and I apologize if I mispronounce anyone's name.
Better than most. Just a couple of observations here, and thank you for your time. Interesting in the presentation from Geranium that on 7 occasions they said, and I quote, when final approval has been granted. I thought there was a process we're supposed to go through. They seem to be getting the cart ahead of the horse. A couple observations here with respect to the water here. I'm across over in Robin Glade, so we had a Robin Glade Homeowners Association when the first phase of the development went through. We were assured that 100 homes was going to be max. And the reason for that was there wasn't enough water. And if you were over there at the time, the people who were drilling wells were poking holes all up and down Jack Short's farm looking for water. Suddenly, we have 44% more water. So the well that they're looking at is supposed to be their backup well, is well number TW213. That's 50 meters from Jack Short's farm. There are provincial restrictions on that. The source water protection policy that says you have to be 100 meters from the fertilizer and pesticides control. So I'm not sure how Geranium plans to stretch that out. Water quality strategy appears to be a best practice approach. Understanding this relatively low-density rural development, my question is, does this still meet the MECP requirements for water quality? I don't think it does. Buffer zones is an interesting one. They keep telling us that they're only going to build on 13% of the property. Well, if you look at the map, and if you've ever walked on Kings Bay, there's not much more than 13% because most of it is swamp and most of it is bulrushes. So the numbers are a little bit misleading sitting here in the council chambers. The setbacks are a concern. The areas, 2 areas, the southernmost homes that they're proposing, there are 9 homes there, is being built on a floodplain. It's identified in their own plan as a floodplain. So my question to Geranium and planners is, how much fill are you going to have to bring in to raise that up? Do you bring in 80,000 cubic meters? 7,500 truckloads. Okay, and they're only coming down one way down that street. And it's interesting that in the presentations and the documents from Geranium, There's no mention about how much fill they're going to bring in. And if they're bringing in all that fill, how is that going to impact on the wildlife, on the trees, the butternut trees, and so on and so forth? There's a lot of gaps here. They're interested in making several points about how they're here to protect the environment. Let's take a look at that. I'm protecting the environment, but I'm cutting down 220 trees. Did I miss something here? It's tough to protect the wildlife when you're cutting down their habitat. On the note of the habitat, Kawarth's own conservation authority has noted that you're going to see a marked increase in the amount of phosphorus going into the lake and to the non-Quan. The non-Quan, designated as a provincially significant wetland. They're acknowledging before they even put a shovel in the ground that this is going to have a negative impact. For your FYI, the original plan has the leaching beds going through the 3rd, 4th, and 5th fairways. And I asked the developer at the time, I said, how long are those beds going to be viable for? He goes, oh, about 15 years, and then the beds have to be pulled up and have to be relined. We're at 15 years. Who's doing that? I don't think there's the capacity to do that. The other area that I have a concern here is that they talk about, oh, we're environmentally sensitive and we're here to protect. This year on April 25th, I notified the Kawartha Conservation Authority in care of Jim Shrubsall, he's a bylaw enforcement officer, that trees along the buffer zone on a very steep embankment on the west side were being removed, presumably to increase the view for residents of the Non-Quan River. They're cutting down trees that are in the buffer zone. Kawartha Conservation has not even made it an effort to get out there yet. They've also notified Geranium, and Geranium has not responded to a single one. So when they talk about environmental sustainability and protectionism, the evidence says quite to the contrary. They're not. I guess the question everybody's asking is, if you look at the plan here, how come there's no homes being built up at the north end of the property? Not a single home. Yet there's room up there for at least 20 of the homes. It doesn't impact on anybody. Why are they not being built? My question is that phase 3? Is that coming next? Right? Because we were told originally, no, it's a golf course, we're not going to bother touching it. So now we're here with phase 2, as the people in Canterbury Commons found out. And contrary to popular opinion expressed here today, not all residents in Canterbury were thrilled losing their golf courses and the community that they moved into. I guess it really comes down to a question of philosophy for the council and the planning committee. Is your philosophy going to be that you're going to do everything you can to help Geranium build 44 homes, which, by the way, I agree there's a home housing crisis in Ontario, but I don't think 44 homes is going to make a dent in that crisis, especially at the price limit they're setting these new homes at. But is it the philosophy of the council that you're interested in building homes at all costs and you can tweak and bend these regulations any way you like? Or are you here to protect the residents here who bought into a community in Kawartha Lakes and get what they were promised? That ultimately will come up to you. But your legacy won't be next year. It won't be in 2 years from now. Your legacy will be in 5 years from now, 10 years from now, when we start seeing the environmental impact. So you have a chance to decide what happens to this small community. I don't think Geranium should be getting the shovels ready based on the submissions today. Thank you, gentlemen, ladies, very much.
Thank you, Mr. Vendrig. Trevor Johnston.
Good afternoon, Mayor Letham and members of council, staff, and guests. My name is Trevor Johnston. I reside at 126 Southcrest Drive. So I back onto the Short Farm and live there with my wife, Susan Merriman. Thank you for the opportunity to appear and speak to the proposed application for development by Geranium Homes in the community of Kings Bay. As a full-time practicing realtor for the past 17 years, chair of the Durham Region Association of Realtors Government Relations Committee, and director at the Durham Region Association of Realtors, and also a member of the Peterborough Kawarthas Association of Realtors, which also covers this jurisdiction, I'd like to offer my professional opinion on the matter at hand. Change is always difficult for homeowners and taxpayers. and we must always ensure that all parties involved take a thoughtful approach to the points brought forward in the deputations by our president, registered planners, and others. There's always much discussion in the real estate sector about housing, housing prices, the highest, best possible use of developable land. I understand that. Affordability, and how to do all of this with the best possible planning processes. As I've come to realize through my experience, a collaborative approach where all concerns are discussed and researched is almost always the best possible outcome in a negotiation, and that's why we're here before you today. This application will directly affect about 33% of the existing homeowners' properties, which is many of the homes being impacted. The two initial major benefits of purchasing a home in this community were the appeal of having a local golf course and water views from a large majority of the homes that were built here. Through this proposal and previous actions, both of these benefits are potentially being removed or significantly altered. The initial benefit was had primarily by the previous group of builders because of the higher prices being charged for the homes being in a preferred location. Or, in some cases, there were additional lot premiums being charged for premium views. Construction of new homes that removes the water views of the existing homes results in two things. First and foremost, Geranium Homes, who is a well-respected builder, would most likely be asking for a premium for those new water views. And secondly, the existing homes could potentially suffer from a large drop in resale value. A unique feature of this community is also the access to municipal water, sewers, and natural gas, and has been a large influencing factor for us and many others in the sale and purchase of homes there. Any additional future load on the municipal water system jeopardizes this value-added feature and could cause a large drop in value if we were to have to resort to holding tanks for water, and subsequently result in reduced current value assessments for taxation revenues, which would also impact the City of Kawartha Lakes financially, known to Council as basically your revenues. I'd respectfully request that Council and staff give this thoughtful consideration and scrutinize all the facts before you, as well as consider the impact of such a decision on the homeowners of the Kings Bay community as they review the application. Prior planning prevents poor performance. It's an old saw, and it applies here as well. There are other ways to plan. Once again, I appreciate your attention, and thank you.
Thank you, Trevor. Judith Spring, anything you'd like to add? Sorry, Councillor O'Reilly, go ahead.
Could I just have a quick couple questions of the speaker there while he was up there? Sorry. Yeah, sure.
Sure.
Anyways, just a quick question. How far do you live from Jack Short's farm?
About 200 feet to the fence line, which in another 35 feet to the manure pit.
Yeah.
It's right.
I know the Shorts and the Shorts. We just live down east of Valencia on O'Reilly Lane. So was there ever any discussion that he was never supposed to have cattle when that subdivision was built?
I wasn't a resident there at the time, so I can't comment.
Okay.
Don't know.
Because I remember there was some discussion that, with the minimum distance separation. And second of all, would you expand about how you think that the real estate value might change because you build better homes? I've had a real estate license since 1986, and so I know that in many areas when they build new homes, it doesn't really affect the price of the existing homes. Quite often it enhances it.
It can do that. However, the flip side of that is it's a new home as opposed to existing resale homes, as you would understand. People prefer to buy the new product as opposed to the older homes. So it does affect the trading aspect of the existing homes in the area. And I can't help but ponder how a developer in the current existing climate, which is in the last month and a half, wants to go out and start offering homes, say, starting at $1.5 million, because I've been involved for many years on affordable housing committees, both with Toronto Real Estate Board and Durham. And we're talking about affordable housing, and there are two aspects of affordable housing. Housing is affordable and affordable housing for people who can't afford it. At $1.5 million, we're not talking about shortening the gap, the window, with the lack of housing in Ontario. We're putting in or projecting 44 homes for move-up buyers who may intentionally move out of the city and create another 40 homes in the City of Toronto or in York Region. So there could be a significant impact. feel strongly about that, and I think with the current environment, I think we're seeing a fluctuation in prices. So I think they'd have difficulty selling out in a short period of time at their price point for what they're proposing, and I do think it would impact us. Yep.
Thank you. Sure, Mike Barkwell, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going back to what they said. You've talked about the water treatment facility. It says that it's only at, the water treatment is at current utilization 46, and proposed use will be 64% capacity. So there seems there will be water, and wastewater treatment, proposed development will use up to 52%. So the report that we have says that there will be plenty of water and plenty of sewage capacity. There have been a few people say, I'm really concerned about that.
I think the comment came from, and I had a conversation probably 2 years ago with Rick Chickendance, who's currently the president of Build, and they drilled 9 wells on the north side of the property and were unable to find water. And his comment to me is, where did the water magically appear from? So there's new technologies called cross-drilling into aquifers, as opposed to drilling down and looking for it and saying, we found water. So there's a real discrepancy there amongst, I think, the facts and the percentages. I don't know where the extra water is coming from. It wasn't there before.
Go ahead, Judy.
Thanks, Andrew. Mr. Chair, members of the Planning Advisory Committee, my name is Judy Spring. I live at 22 Crescent Moon Lane in the Kings Bay community, and I am Vice President of the KBRA Association. I simply want to support the comments made by Susan Merriman and Kent Randall. The applicant has provided extensive reports from consultants supporting their application, and it will be very important to the residents to access the peer reviews. So our understanding is, for the most part, they're not available yet. Without limiting, we particularly are interested in the reports related to water. So, but we are interested to see those peer reviews. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Judy. Dr. Gail Johnson-Morris.
Thanks for the opportunity. I submitted a written statement, and I have no sort of public comments, other than we appreciate your time and the application of talent to this. It's critically important for us, and we need things to be weighed on. We get very different points of view. Historically, we heard no water. We know that houses that were built on Stub Road, new homes, ran out of water within a few weeks of being there and spent a lot of money to drill to find water. So how does this sync up? And, sorry.
Okay. Okay, thanks, Gail. And we can confirm your letter was part of the package as well. Okay, I think we have a Rosa Bryan on Zoom. Is there anything you would like to add, Rosa?
Hi, yes, I would like to say a few words. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rosa Bryan. I would just like to go on record that related to Geranium and Kings Bay application, there is an ongoing petition registered online at Jump in Kawartha Lakes. To date, that petition has already received 155 signatures from individuals who all share the exact same concerns raised here today by my fellow residents pertaining to the environment, water supply and flow rates, wildlife, archaeological disturbances, and the burden on the existing infrastructures, etc. In addition to these concerns, Geranium's proposal will cut down beautiful, healthy, mature trees to erect new homes, sandwiching them between existing homeowners and the Nonquan River, with no regard for the existing homeowners' views of the Nonquan River, property values, and just as important, existing homeowners' mental health and emotional well-being. This proposal has caused great anxiety affecting my fellow residents' personal health. My husband and I moved to Kings Bay to enjoy retirement on the golf course. That was very short-lived. To our extreme disappointment, the golf course was shut down 1 year after we moved in. Our resolve, however, was to continue to enjoy the spectacular views of the Noncon River, the wildlife, the peacefulness, and all the beauty that Kings Bay has to offer. Please do not allow geranium to strip Kings Bay of the core essence that it was founded on over 20 years ago. The proposal submitted by Geranium, in my opinion, in a lot of our opinions, is not a vision of designing a better community, but rather than destroying an existing one. We ask that you please say no to the proposal. For your time today, I thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Mrs. Bryan. Dave Marks, anything you would like to add, Dave?
Yes, I would like to.
Go ahead.
Yes, thank you for your time. I am also a resident of Kings Bay and South Crest Drive. I'd like to address the following concerns that I have re the proposed 44 homes to be built. Groundwater. The Kings Bay development groundwater is obtained from an aquifer that has been identified by Kawartha Conservation in 2012 as being highly vulnerable. Their words, not mine. Kawartha Conservation further stated in 2012 that the average household usage of water was 1,000 liters of water per day. Current studies now rate this as 500 liters a day. It must be noted that previous developers have applied for building permits, but due to the lack of groundwater, permits were not obtained. Geranium Homes states that it has sufficient water for its proposed development. Candidly, they simply drilled a well into the existing aquifer, the highly vulnerable one. The addition of 44 homes would increase water usage by approximately 40%, or another 22,000 to 44,000 liters of water per day. For this reason, I submit to you that these permit applications should not be issued due to concerns over the supply of groundwater. The Noncon River and Lake Scugog. The Scugog Lake stewards reported in June of 2022 that the lake was 8 inches higher than historically previously recorded. Should homes be built on the shore of the river, in particular the south side of this plan, and should this trend continue, high water, flood damage may be possible. This organization also stresses the need to maintain natural shorelines. Natural shorelines remove bacteria, phosphorus, or nitrates. It's quite obvious that further development will eliminate the natural shoreline that's currently in place. And I have to state that beyond what they're referring to as a nature reserve, the conservation regulated property goes from the east side of the Noncon River through to the west side of South Crest Drive. I know that for a fact because I had to get a permit from Kawartha Conservation to build my deck. Lastly, the Kings Bay Environmental Center. A City of Kawartha Lakes report dated March 2020, which was the latest report I could locate. In this report, the center did not comply with current Ontario Clean Water Agency limits, in particular, suspended solids, effluent. And I think we all know what effluent is. It must be noted that the same failure of compliance existed in 2018 and 2019. Any further development will make this situation worse. To conclude, I feel that there is a substantial risk to the city of Kawartha Lakes should you allow this development, specifically maintaining groundwater for the homes, ensuring that the environmental center complies with current standards, flooding, and the remaining undeveloped space, which there's no doubt in my mind will be the responsibility of the city. Substantial portions of this proposed development are on conservation regulated property. Why? I don't believe that this was an exercise in bureaucracy. In my mind, it's due to the factors that I have discussed. These conservation regulations supersede any effort to build more homes. And on that, I'd like to conclude, and I truly appreciate the time that you've given me to address this committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Marks. That is the bottom of my list, so I will call, is there anyone else online who wishes to speak to this application? Is there anyone else online wishing to speak to the application?
If anyone would like to speak who's on the Zoom, please turn on your video at this time.
Third and final call for anybody wishing to speak to the application. Seeing and hearing none. Does the applicant or the agent on behalf of the applicant wish to respond to the questions and comments heard here today?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We would, and let me though also say that we appreciate the comments from the community, and we will continue a dialogue with the residents and reach out and have perhaps a more detailed discussion. But I think in fairness to all here today, I would like to call on our team to respond in a little more detail to some of the concerns that have been expressed. So perhaps to start off with the water supply and the wastewater capacity questions and concerns. Starting with water supply, I'd like to call on our Golder team members to speak to the work that they did and the findings that have been reported.
Yes, hello, thank you. I'm John Pearsall from WSP Golder, and I'm a hydrogeologist with Golder for about 20 years, and this is interesting community with an aquifer, as you've mentioned, that has 3 wells developed in it, currently existing wells. When we've been involved for a number of years in this area. And we undertook a groundwater exploration test well drilling program as part of this work, and identified, as was mentioned by some of the people giving comments here, the aquifer, the existing aquifer, has been identified as the having capacity to supply the additional demands. It is limited in extent, as noted by some of the gentlemen giving comments. The property to the north, there was a previous exploration program there that did not find a suitable aquifer in that area. That is to the north of the existing aquifer. We looked at potential other aquifers either deeper in the rock or elsewhere on the site, and the supply is limited. However, for the existing aquifer in the area developed by 3 wells, we're confident that it has the capacity needed to supply the demands for the additional units. And I'll also call on T.Y. Lin after this to speak on the demand side projections of the capacities for the homes. But the aquifer clearly to us through pumping tests we conducted has the capacity to supply the required demands, and our reports, as mentioned, are undergoing a peer review process for that. We will note that as part of ensuring a sustainable water supply, these wells do require ongoing maintenance and rehabilitation. In the past, there had been some issues with one of the wells due to a well construction problems with the well, and it was replaced with a replacement well that has improved capacity. The additional well we have located in the existing well field is as a backup well, which will improve the redundancy and the capacity should any of the existing wells need to be taken offline for rehabilitation and service or otherwise, which I think going back to the original studies for the well field, that was foreseen moving forward, that a fourth well as you move to greater demands would be required for what is called firm capacity, that is essentially redundant capacity. Regarding the source protection aspects, the project team has been in discussions with the source protection officials from various agencies regarding source protection measures and implications for adding this new backup well. As mentioned, it will involve some changes to the source protection vulnerability ratings of the system. Currently, there are a number of areas, portions of the source protection zone that are rated high vulnerability, as was mentioned. It's not the entire existing system, it's portions that do extend onto the adjacent agricultural property. There's an ongoing dialogue with the source protection officials on risk management plans and measures that have been in place already for the existing system that will need to be revisited should this additional backup well come online for a minor increase in the area that is it has implications on that property. So that's one of the key aspects of source water protection. I think I'll turn it over to colleagues from T.Y. Lin to speak to the water demand aspects of the questions. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, John. Before you go, can you comment on respond to the comment about the concern about water drawdown for the neighboring farmer?
Yeah, so we have conducted a pumping test, and the existing, that combined with the existing wells have a permit. Currently, under the Ministry of the Environment, the permit to take water process in the province requires conditions that the owner of the wells who's doing the pumping and has to do a monitoring and mitigation program to ensure there are no impacts to other water users or surface water features. The current permit for the existing wells has conditions for monitoring. There are a number of monitoring wells on the property that are being monitored on a monthly basis. The addition of this new backup well would require an amendment to the permit to take water, which the Ministry of the Environment technical reviewers would again review the monitoring program and our technical assessment to ensure that it's adequate, that there will not be impacts to adjacent water well users. The testing we've done has shown that the aquifer in the vicinity of the existing wells. The extent of the drawdown is limited such that adjacent property owner wells are not within the extent of the drawdown interference zone. It is a fairly, even though it's limited in extent, it's a fairly productive aquifer that does not have extensive distance of propagation of drawdowns and well interference. But that's taken into account in our technical reports and will be reviewed by the ministry to ensure adequacy also.
And John, one more. You referred to the redundancy, the additional well that we're proposing for redundancy purposes. Would you consider that an overall improvement to the system?
Yeah, definitely. And as you know, as I mentioned, and this is where the water engineers can speak also. You know, a lot of that was one of the earlier recommendations of the studies, also to go beyond the current number of units for development and ensure there's sufficient wells such that if one was taken online for work, rehabilitation or improvements or replacement, as has happened in the past, that there is a backup well. So I think in terms of increasing demands moving forward and the current situation, it's an improvement to have an additional fourth well, and the system should be carefully monitored in terms of well performance and rehabilitation, as is standard for operation of systems, to make sure the wells are performing up to their design capacities, and rehabilitation or replacement be carried out as needed. And the aquifer has the capacity, so it's ensuring the system is properly managed and maintained is the critical aspect from our point of view.
Thank you, John. Can I now call on our folks from TY Lynn to comment on the wastewater capacity?
Head second, I'm trying to get
Thank you, Ian.
Video. It's Ian Parkinson. I think my video up. Yeah, so you look into the wastewater treatment plant there, and as we understand, it is currently undergoing some refits to deal with its slight exceedance on its MECB guidelines. In discussions with Aqua, they have taken one RB offline, and it should be replaced shortly. It was undergoing repairs. So we've looked into the plant, and when it's up and operational as it should be, it has plenty of spare capacity to handle the new homes. As we said, even with the new homes added, it will still be up to about 50% of its actual already approved thing. Now, there was also a question about the loadings. So what we did was we looked at the loading coming from the community based on Aquas, that's Ontario Clean Water Agencies, who run the wastewater plant. We looked at the flow going into the plant and divided it out among the existing homes. And then we used that same loading to look at the new homes coming in. And also, just to be sure, we also looked at a much higher loading rate of about 450 liters per person and per household. So assuming 2 people per household, and even at that loading, which is twice the loading the community is currently using, we were around 80% capacity of the sewage plant and a little less on the water plant. So even with very conservative numbers that basically no community uses these days, most communities use about 220 to 250 liters per capita per person. We use 450, and there was still adequate capacity in both the water plant and the wastewater plant.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Ian.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, I'd also like to respond to the concern expressed about the suggestion of building in the floodplain and the question about how much fill. I can assure the committee and the community that we will not be building in the floodplain. And I think it might be helpful to hear from our stormwater management team at SCS. So either Michael or Sarah, I think they're both on the line. Can I call on the two of you or one of you? Hi, Michael.
Yeah. Hi, how are you? Yeah, so speaking to the floodplain setbacks, in most cases, I'll note that the 30-meter setback from the wetland is generally more conservative than the floodplain on the Nonnequan River side. But in all cases, it's being maintained for all development. That setback limit is shown on draft plan, engineering figures, drawings. City of Kawartha Lakes has it for review and they can verify, but it is being maintained. The second point for cut fill, it's actually quite the opposite. We have a bit of surplus cut material on the site, and what we're doing is filling as close as we can to where the material is being cut to mitigate truck movement on South Crest. I could actually screen share. I have a figure in front of me that maybe helps illustrate that. But essentially there's fill material. Yeah, I'll screen share. It's been disabled.
I think if you could provide for the, I don't know whether we'll have the ability to share your screen, but if you could provide confirmation that we're not building homes in the floodplain and filling the area in order to build homes in the floodplain.
Correct. No fills being imported onto site. Some minor cut and fill movement around site, but limiting any movement on South Crest itself, mostly through the open space area. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
No problem.
The other comment or concern that we heard was about the impact on walleye. And from a water quality perspective, ladies and gentlemen and members of the committee, phosphorus is item of concern, and that is why our work is to ensure that there will be no change, no net increase in phosphorus. And I know we've got somebody on the team from Hutchinson who's done our phosphorus management analysis. So Deborah or Christine, there's Deborah. Hi, Deborah.
Hi.
Could you just elaborate a little more in a little more detail on what's being done to deal with the phosphorus, the whole phosphorus budget?
For sure, not a problem. So Hutchinson Environmental Sciences, we did a phosphorus budget for the existing site and for the redeveloped site. And what we did was calculate the projected phosphorus loading presently and under the redeveloped site. And under the redeveloped condition, there, as Cheryl mentioned, is predicted to be a marginal increase of 0.8 kilograms per year of phosphorus runoff. That's, and to note, that's a minor increase. However, there are additional stormwater measures that can be implemented and will be implemented to reduce that to zero. And these can be on-site or off-site. On-site measures include infiltration trenches, enhanced rain gardens, and bioswales. And off-site measures can be filtration devices at storm sewer outfalls. So although there's a marginal projected increase right now, measures will be implemented to reduce that to zero.
And what does that mean for the water quality for the walleye?
Yeah, thank you. That means that there'll be no change from existing conditions to the water quality adjacent to the site, and which means that the conditions that are there now will be maintained with respect to phosphorus or the walleye.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Beacon Environmental did our natural heritage investigations, and there were some questions and comments about endangered species and species at risk. So Christy, if you're able to connect in from your mobile office.
Hi, everybody. From my mobile office today. I am parked in situ now, so we're good to go.
Okay, so there were concerns expressed, Christy, about those species that we looked at. And I wonder if you could elaborate just on what we did and the appropriateness of what was done.
Absolutely. So everyone, I'm Christy Quinn with Beacon Environmental. I'm a senior environmental planner, and I was the
Christy,
project
just assure
manager.
us that your car is not like on its side, right? You actually are upright?
Yeah, I'm
Okay,
totally
good.
upright, and I am stopped and parked, and I have been for a while. So I've been listening to all of the comments. So we did the environmental impact study. Our field surveys date back to 2016 and carried right on through 21. So we did do an assessment of threatened and endangered species that had the potential to occur on the property. And we also went out, we did a habitat assessment, and then we did targeted surveys for any species that had the potential to occur. As was mentioned at the beginning, we did find butternut trees on the property. Butternut are endangered tree species. They're all indicated, their locations are presented in the EIS, and all of those trees have been afforded a 25-meter radius around them, which is essentially the maximum habitat that would be provided to them by the Ministry of Environment. And we are not proposing to encroach into that zone. So all butternut will be retained on site. The second species that was noted in one of the residents' comments was the barn swallow. So we did do breeding birds on site on 2 different occasions. Barn swallow were not recorded on the property. They were recorded foraging or flying over the property. But the barn swallow essentially breeds or nests in structures. So Shoreline, this is better? Sorry. So we did a search for habitat. Were there any potential structures on site that could provide barn swallow habitat? And they did not exist. So we do not have barn swallow habitat on the property. So those are the 2 endangered species that were flagged and addressed through seasonal surveys, and no further action is required for either. There were 2 species of special concern that were mentioned by the resident. The first one is eastern wood pewee, which is a woodland bird species, which is found in the woodlands off property, and those areas will be maintained and buffered. Therefore, we do not have any concern that the wood pewee will continue to utilize that area. The second is the snapping turtle, and we did note snapping turtle nesting in some of the sand traps on the property. We have looked at that and we have considered it in the development, and those sand traps that are being utilized will be maintained post-development. So Geranium has looked at them, we've worked around them, and we've ensured that they will be there for the snapping turtles continued use. They're actually in the area between the 2 banks of lots. And we've implemented special mitigation measures during construction and post-construction to ensure that everybody is aware that the turtles might be using this area. We're going to limit any works in that area during the nesting season, and those are special mitigation measures for that species.
Okay, thank you, Christy. I'd like to now just note Mr. Wakeford's concern about the 21 archaeological sites that were identified on the property. And I would note that those sites were identified across the entirety of both the property that we are talking about today, as well as the lands that are now developed with homes. And so, as I noted earlier, and Ms. Morgan spoke to as well, the archaeologist, our work, which has been conducted under the auspices of the Ministry of Culture in terms of the methodology, did not identify any archaeological sites today. And so you have our assurance that we will not be in contravention of any of those requirements to protect archaeological sites. Our work is continuing with the First Nations, who are fully aware of what we are doing, as are the staff at the Ministry of Culture, who are responsible for upholding the Heritage Act, I suppose, is what this work is conducted under. So Jen, is there anything that I missed or misstated? Would you like to add anything to that?
No, I think that's a good summary
Okay.
of what we found. That,
Okay.
you know,
Thank
there
you.
were sites there, and you know, we didn't find any in the development area.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I think finally, there were some comments or some concerns about the cul-de-sacs in the street system being able to accommodate fire emergency vehicles and school buses. So I'd like to ask Mark Jameson from BA Transportation Engineers to comment on those concerns. Mark, could I call, are you online?
I'm here, Cheryl. Thank you. Through you to the chair, Mr. Chair, to answer that question. So my name is Mark Jameson. I am with BA Group. We're the transportation firm that did the transportation study. We've also helped by reviewing some of the transportation design aspects related to the site. With respect to the design of the cul-de-sacs, the current proposal allows for, I would call, the municipal standard cul-de-sac size, which is sufficient to accommodate a variety of vehicles. It's large enough, and a lot of it's related to maintenance. Typically, specifically the snow plows is a vehicle that needs to turn around in the standard cul-de-sac. And in that size, you can also accommodate other vehicles such as emergency vehicles and school buses through either a continuous turn or, worst case, a 3-point turn. So we believe those comments are addressed through the proposed roundabouts that, or sorry, proposed cul-de-sacs that are considered in the plan today.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Finally, there were a couple of comments about concerns about impact on property values. And I want to share for the benefit of those joining us today in the committee that we now have experience building in communities on lands that were previously golf courses, new homes. And our experience has been that there has not been a decrease in property values as a result of those new homes. They are done in a way that fit into the community. It's a similar character. The landscaping and the buffering between the new and the existing, we take a lot of care to do an excellent work in that regard. And so, I don't know if I can put people's minds fully at ease, but I'm just wanted you to know that from our experience in other places, we have not experienced that to be the case. And in fact, we have seen price escalation occur instead. There is an aspect that represents investment in the community, and that can be seen quite positively by the housing market. So I will leave that comment for all of you to consider. So Mr. Chairman, if the committee has any questions that they'd like to put to our team, we certainly are still all assembled and happy to respond.
Thank you very much. Committee, any questions? Moving to item 3.1.2 on today's agenda. Committee, what are your wishes? Mayor Latham.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll give you the motion that report plan 2022-047, official plan amendment, zoning bylaw amendment, and plan of subdivision, Kings Bay 27 Stub Road, Mariposa, be received for information, and that report plan 2022-047, official plan amendment, zoning bylaw amendment, and plan of subdivision, Kings Bay 27 Stub Road, Mariposa, be referred back to staff for processing until review of the technical issues has been completed and comments from the public have been addressed. Thank you.
Seconder, Wayne Brumwell. Any discussion? Calling the question, all in favor? That carries. Thank you. That at this point, the public meeting portion of today's meeting held under the Planning Act is now adjourned, And I'm going to suggest, before we move on to regular and returned reports, that we take a quick 7-minute break. How's that?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Deputations, we have none. Correspondence, we have none. Regular and returned reports. Item 6.1, Plan 2022-030, application to amend the Verlam zoning bylaw 6-87 at 63 North Bayou Road, Verlam. Ian Walker, let's go, Ian.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Through you, Mr. Chair. So I'm just going to share my screen here, or I can't, sorry.
Cole's notes, Ian, Cole's notes.
Cole's notes. Okay, so the property is basically at the eastern terminus of North Bayou Road in former Verlam. Sorry, now I am able to screen share here. Just sharing the presentation. So this is the property here near the cul-de-sac at the end. So just very quick Cole's notes on what has transpired. The public meeting was held back in 2017 for this application. I believe that was at the time when we were still planning committee, not planning advisory committee. So I don't believe any of the public members of the committee would have necessarily been aware of this one. At that time, most of the properties in this subdivision along North Bayou are residentially zoned. There are a few, including this one, which is zoned open space in the Verlam zoning bylaw. Most of the properties on the east side here are also zoned open space. The mapping does indicate there's provincially significant wetland up through this area here. This part of the subdivision up here was never built or constructed or sold. So I believe a deeming bylaw may have been applied to the lands up in through here. It's quite possible. However, at this time, the city actually, I have confirmed through Realty Services, the city does own up into this original cul-de-sac here. And then this portion of the road is privately owned. So this application basically is to rezone to permit residential uses on the property. We would view that as being more like an LSR zone because it's fronting onto what is today considered a private road, which the city may or may not take ownership of at some point. The other concern here is that it is a fairly low property right along the waterfront. And so there is also some flooding in and around the area. So Kawartha Conservation highly regulates this property because of the presence of wetlands on it, and as well the floodplain in and around that area. So a flood study was done. They looked at staying outside of the wetland pocket. So this was the original sketch submitted. I believe they've since tweaked the concept a little bit. But you can essentially see they were looking at maintaining and staying within this envelope here, which is their building envelope proposed. This is the wetland boundary here in green, and then you can see the flood line has been shown here in red. So there will be a little bit of filling and grading done within this part of the property to make sure that it's properly raised. They can flood proof the building or structure through Kawartha conservation permits. There have been some provisions provided in the zoning to confirm that all the openings have to be a certain elevation that gets them up above any flooding. And they do have safe access, as has been determined here through the survey. They show that they can get to the property. So they meet the provincial policy requirements in terms of access to the site. Again, it's an existing lot of record, went through a public process starting in 2017, and it has taken us until really early 2022 to get confirmation through refinement of some of those studies and some back and forth with Kawartha Conservation to get to a point where they were satisfactory that we could move forward with this rezoning. So what will happen is the proposed zoning amendment would keep the bulk of the property in open space zoning and an open space exception to allow the development on that portion of the property. That does get the landowner what they're looking to achieve here in terms of a dwelling. And on top of that, that also gives them the ability to build on there and keep the remainder of the lot in that open space to protect the natural features on it. So with that being said, I have provided the recommendation, and staff respectfully recommend that the application be approved as presented in the report. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Ian. Committee, any questions of Ian at this time? Seeing none, there's a recommendation in your package. What are your wishes, Councillor O'Reilly?
Thank you, to you, Mr. Chair, that the report to amend the zoning Verlam bylaw 6-87 to vacant land on North Bayou Road, Verlam, Bohm. Application D06-17024 be received, that the zoning bylaw amendments substantially in the form attached as Appendix D to Report Plan 2022-030 be referred to Council for approval and adoption, that in accordance with Section 34 bracket 17 of the Planning Act, Council, having considered the changes to the proposal zoning bylaw amendment, deemed no further public notice be necessary, said, and that the mayor and clerk be authorized to execute any documents required by the approval of these applications.
Thank you. Seconder, Wayne Brumwell. Any discussion? Calling the question. All in favor? That carries. Thank you. Item 6.2, an update to development application approval process fee for subdivisions. Christina Sisson.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. I'm before you today to recognize the fact that we have worked diligently as a municipality to encourage and attract development. We want to continue to attract development, but also support that development. In doing so, we're looking at the resource stream. Several municipalities in the Ontario region are looking at their fee structure and have quite complicated fee structures and are looking for 100% payment of all fees by developers solely and no support from the residential community, the existing taxpayer. Our presentation was to look at what the 50-50 percentage would be, 50% support from the municipality, 50% from the developer, and that led us to about a 6% fee, an increase from our current DAT fee of 3.7%. That was deemed a little bit of a steep hike in a short period of time, and so we're looking at a 4.5% increase at this time. That represents roughly 36% paid by the developer of our budget at this time. There are some improvements happening over the next year. The development engineering budget per se will be a separate line item. So we'll have our own separate area where we can look at our own codes and our own inputs. That will help us to track some of this, the fee. Other municipalities have looked at using some form of consultant to review this. We believe at this time we're capable of doing some of that and would like to save the taxpayer in that particular respect. So at this time, we're looking at the 4.5%. We don't want any other changes to the fee. This is only for the subdivisions. The payment structure the same, no incremental fees. We're pleased to announce that the city most recently received the Consolidated Linear Infrastructure Environmental Compliance Approval from the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks. And so we're looking into how that gets factored in as well. However, we don't see any need for an additional fee increase. At this time, we're looking at 4.5% with the recommendation that we do come back in 2 years with further recommendations for fee structure, just to make sure that we're fair with the amount of development that's proposed, amount of development coming in, and what the budgets are at that time. Thank you. I'm open to any questions.
Thanks for that, Christina. Committee, any questions at this time? Wayne, go ahead.
Through you, Chair Christine, what is the 4.5% calculated on?
Sorry, I was trying to do a Coles Notes version of the report. So at this time, the engineers submit an estimate of the construction of all municipal infrastructure, and they provide an estimate at the time of the subdivision draft plan, post-draft plan. And what we do is we look at that number and we charge the 4.5% on that total cost of construction works. And we receive 75% at the outset, and the remaining 25% is based on the final engineering cost estimate that goes into the actual subdivision agreement. So it's all based on the cost of works, and not just the cost of works, not private works, the cost of municipal infrastructure construction from the engineer.
Thank you.
Any further questions of Christina at this time? All right, there's a recommendation in your package. Councillor Seymour Fagan.
Okay, as per written, that report ENG 2022-021, update to development application approvals process, fee for subdivisions be received, that the city's development application approvals process fee be increased to 4.5% for subdivisions, and that the city's cost estimate schedule for subdivisions to be updated and amended for 2023 as outlined in Appendix A to report engineering 2022-21 and that the city reviewed the DAP fee every 2 years to ensure the fee is fair and in line with the cost of engineering review and project management by the city.
Seconder for the motion, Jason Willick. Any discussion? Calling the question, all in favor? That carries. Thank you. Item number 7, Mayor Latham, seconded by Wayne. All in favor? We are adjourned. Thank you very much for your time this afternoon.